All righty, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back for another appearance today, James Kobielus. He is the Senior Research Director for Data Management here with us at TDWI and a frequent guest on the podcast here. So always happy to talk with you, Jim. We're going to talk today about the state of data governance. There was a report that was recently released on TDWI last month on this topic, but I think it's an apt time as we look into potentially the new year approaching vastly the state of data governance. But before we jump into everything, Jim, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for your time.
I'm doing good, Andrew. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, good. Okay, great. So let's jump right in here. State of data governance. We've talked about this topic many times on this podcast. I think this is going to be a great update for folks. So, Jim, what are the hallmarks of mature enterprise data governance practices?
Really, when we look at TWI research, when we look at the state of data governance, really there are five broad dimensions that we use to evaluate whether any enterprise or enterprises generally, where they are on their data governance journeys towards a mature data governance practice. And really the practice consists of considerations related to the people you have. Are they in the right roles? Are they well trained for their functions? Do they know what their functions are? How do their functions fit into a broader workflow or collaboration around data governance? It also refers to processes. So workflows, processes, structures under which various people and various systems do various things at various times to advance your data governance initiatives towards completion or satisfaction of their assigned duties and so forth. And platforms. Do you have the right cloud infrastructure, software tools, and the like to do data governance right? By right, I mean scalably, efficiently, accurately, and so forth. So when we look at five dimensions of a mature data governance practice, we break them down into organizational commitment to data governance, processes for data governance, accountability for data governance, assurance and impact for data governance, and here's my fifth, I have five fingers, tooling for data governance. I'll just break it down. So organizational commitment, does an organization from the top down and bottom up focus on strategy, funding, executive support, roles, and cultures in support of their data governance efforts? Processes. Does an organization have established processes for data governance, including, and here's where I start to break out what data governance includes: managing data quality, protecting the privacy of personally identifiable data, collaboration around data stewardship and policy administration, and policy management. Do you have the right tools for and metadata and other assets in order to author and modify and enforce data governance policies across the organization? Accountability. Does your organization have processes in place that ensure that data governance effectively addresses internal and external policies related to, or externally facing policies related to compliance, let's say with federal or state standards, for example, with relation to the handling of personally identifiable information, for example. So do you have the processes in place for assuring that you are accountable for showing results, the right results on data governance initiatives, mandates, regulations, and also for providing reporting to stakeholders, such as your end users, such as your senior executives, on the effectiveness of your data governance initiatives? Assurance and impact. Do you measure the key performance indicators and metrics in such data governance areas as data quality, data integrity, data risk mitigation? Last but not least, tooling. Does your organization implement a deep stack of tools, platforms, and infrastructure in support of data governance? When I say a deep stack, we're talking about a cloud data environment. We're talking about a data quality profiling and matching and merging and master data management, data cleansing and data augmentation. There's a lot of things that fall under the heading of what kind of tools and platforms you need to do data governance correctly. So those are the major dimensions of data governance. A mature practice, really a mature practice for data governance, what we're looking for is to the extent to which an organization has data governance practices that span all data sets, from structured to unstructured. Not every company does this, but here's what we're looking for. Um, does an organization have standards for data governance that span not just all data sets, but all business units up and down the company? Do you have operational personnel assigned to data governance tasks such as data stewardship, master data management, and the like? Um, do you have processes in place that ensure that any problems with your data, errors or bias issues and whatnot, are flagged before they can be pushed into production environments and disrupt your organization? In other words, do you have risk? Do you have issue detection and remediation processes in place? Do you have automation of these functions for data governance throughout the life cycle, from when data is created to when it's accessed and consumed, governing everything? Are you automating the profiling, the matching, merging, cleansing, correction of data, the reporting on data quality metrics? And are you able to automate these functions across different human roles that are involved in the data governance lifecycle? We're talking about both the business people who are, for example, the data stewards, let's say for finance data versus marketing data and whatnot, but also the IT people whose job it is to keep those platforms and tools and so forth in place, working hard to enforce your data governance policies and able to scale as the volume and velocity and variety of your data grows, able to scale to keep your data governance operations working 24/7, to keep your data accurate, to keep your data of high quality, to keep your data free of bias, and so on and so forth. So to what extent have you got a scalable, highly performant, enterprise-wide, comprehensive data governance capability in your organization that is a sustainable capability? So that's what we look for, TWI, when we do a state of study such as this, especially in this area of data governance that's so fundamentally critical to your ability to unlock the full value of your data and to guard against the downsides of things like data breaches and different data sets becoming out of sync in terms of their accuracy and so forth. So that's what we look for in terms of maturity.
Well, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, obviously.
Yeah.
And, part of the state of, I think, is a little bit of a snapshot for us on how enterprises are able to accomplish all those things and try to have a great data governance program in place. So, Jim, where on their journey are a lot of these, enterprises trying to become mature? Are they, I'm sure there's a wide shot here, but
Yeah.
but where do they tend to sit right now?
Right. Well, the results of the survey, which was in market for weeks, and we had a sufficient number of respondents from across the world and across different industries, people in different roles ranging from data management to advanced analytics. So we had a broad and representative feedback from the respondent population. And what we found is that generally enterprises are midway through their data governance journeys. And I'll break out it really midway. We call that established maturity, which means they're not absolute beginners. They've got more than a clue, and they've been implementing, say, data quality management for a while, but not necessarily in a fully automated, scalable way, not necessarily across all data sets, not necessarily addressing all compliance mandates above and beyond data quality. There's things like mitigating data biases, ensuring ethical handling of data and so forth, that broadly fall under the heading of governance that enterprises may not be doing, but still they might be doing data quality management, the core of all this, quite well. So what I'm saying is many organizations are halfway on their journeys towards full maturity, addressing all these concerns, addressing all their data sets. So what established data governance maturity refers to, what we found in general across all of our respondents, was that organizational commitment, Many, the plurality, and really the majority of the survey respondents have executive leadership responsibility and accountability defined for data governance strategy, plan, objectives, and standards. They got CDOs and chief analytics officers in place who take this stuff seriously as they should, because that's their core business asset they're managing. Organizational commitment also means they have enterprise data governance, communications, coordination, and collaboration going on to some degree. So there often in many organizations, there is a central data governance coordinating body whose job it is to ensure that the different business units are talking to each other and all have a common framework or process or workflow, or at least a common set of roles for handling data governance functions such as data profiling and data cleansing, that there's an enterprise communication of strategy at the very least. That's often in place in today's business world, that level of organizational commitment. Um, Processes. Established maturity means that you have established standardized processes for data governance, at least for data quality management, including accountability and funding. So you are paying people to be your data stewards as a full-time or at least a part-time ongoing function. For example, you have IT people identified to manage, for example, your repository for, like a data warehouse for your single version of truth on customer data records and so forth. Organizations that are established in data governance maturity all have designated data stewards who are operationally responsible. But they're also, in many cases, many organizations are implementing the core tools of data, modern data governance, which is data catalogs for centralized cataloging of the metadata and the semantics and the glossaries and so forth pertaining to your data assets. Increasingly implementing data observability tools to be able to view the status of data in terms of quality through at every point in its life cycle. And data lineage tools are widely adopted to enable you to automatically roll up the provenance of your data in terms of when it was created, who handled it, at what point, what functions were performed on it, as a way for data stewards and any other stakeholder to get a sense for how good is our data right now? Where has it been? Who's touched it? Is it all in conformance with our standard practices? And that there is some automation going on for these functions, but the automation is still not complete. It's usually only for structured data, not the unstructured data in most companies, primarily structured data. And it's primarily for the data that you've generated in-house from your transactional systems and all that. But over time, we see more organizations. Of course, the state of it is a snapshot at one point in time. Over time, we see at TDWI, we see organizations expanding the breadth of their data governance practices to including unstructured and semi-structured data sources, excuse me, and to expanding the amount of automation they do, at least in terms of being able to roll up and consolidate and correlate data into master records. The automation is growing in these core areas. And there is some automation, at least in terms of data profiling upon ingest, at least in terms of match and merge and cleansing of your core structured data. That's widespread in businesses today. Accountability and established accountability. You've implemented data governance primarily in response to external regulations. Many organizations have definitely gotten religion on data privacy, data sovereignty, data retention, data protection, because many of these governance concerns are mandates in laws that they have to conform with in the US and Europe and elsewhere. But accountability is not necessarily all reactive to external demands. Many organizations have begun to address data governance mandates to satisfy internal stakeholders. The core things that your business is running on, such as quality data, curated data that's been tagged by its relevance to particular, like finance or marketing and whatnot, and lineage tracking to keep track of where your data is and where it's, how it's been processed. You need to know all these things if you're using data for decision support internally. So if the data you're using, you're bringing into your spreadsheets or you're submitting to Wall Street to report on your key performance indicators of business, you got to know that that's high quality. And many organizations have locked down the data quality management side of all of this quite a while ago in terms of having at least the core capabilities they need to satisfy both the internal auditors and other stakeholders, but also external, like for example, government bodies that demand these increasingly and will levy high penalties if you don't, respond to these mandates that are written into law. Assurance and impact. At established data governance maturity, organizations have established metrics for monitoring them and measuring performance and efficiency and effectiveness of their data governance processes. Observability is a set of tools for doing this. It's providing you with real-time status, not only on the quality of your data, wherever it's come from, however it's being used, but also on the health of the entire pipeline of processes needed to manage that data from end to end and ensure that it's being processed in a way that is compliant, but also doesn't introduce any errors or biases into the data. So organizations have metrics, many organizations now, for measuring the core things that they want to achieve with good governance, which is like correct, current, compliant, conformant data. That's pretty much widespread in the business world, as well as, of course, reporting to the key stakeholders on how well these functions are being managed. Stakeholders like your chief financial officer wants to make sure that your financial data is accurate so that he or she then is not called before a judge or a jury or the a congressional committee to explain why they screwed up. Clearly there's a lot of severe stakes if you don't maintain quality data in lots of businesses and lots of functions. But structured data, structured relational data is still very much the core of all this. Unstructured data traditionally is less important. Maybe that's the wrong term. We're less relevant to compliance mandates related to your operational functions. But over time, we see more unstructured data coming into the broader governance discipline because increasingly more of your business runs on unstructured and semi-structured data that you're sourcing from various places. And tooling, at midway at established maturity, your organization has implemented robust tooling integral to data engineering, data warehousing, and business analytics. Many organizations have begun to adopt tools for like I said, for automation of data profiling, cleansing, and data quality reporting for dashboarding and the like. Many organizations now have begun to adopt data catalogs. In fact, data catalogs, among all the pieces of infrastructure that organizations have implemented for data governance, our survey has shown that that is the number one piece of the stack, a data catalog. In fact, half of the respondents have already implemented a data catalog internally for data governance, for cataloging metadata, cataloging the provenance of data sets, the ownership, cataloging what other data sets, the linkages among data sets and the like. Master data management is widespread in the business world for consolidating data, for example, customer data from various sources into master records. So MDM, master data management, is very widespread in terms of deployment. Our survey has found data lineage, data compliance, metadata management. In real time, data quality monitoring is one of the top investments that organizations are making so they can detect and proactively and preventatively fix quality problems before they become an issue, or if they've become an issue, can mediate, or the wrong word, remediate those problems, fix them. See, three-letter words easier. Fix those problems before they become a serious problem in terms of corrupting or falsifying, for that matter, maybe unintentionally, the data you present to your internal and external stakeholders. But data quality monitoring in real time is becoming a mainstream capability in tooling. But also very much what we see is there's a clear trend towards using AI to automate more of these functions inside of your data governance environment as a way of helping individual and teams of data governance professionals to do their jobs more effectively or across a wider range of data sets to address a wider range of downstream governance mandates and so forth. AI now is the beating heart of a highly scalable data governance practice in the business world, and businesses know it, and they're going to town in terms of bringing AI augmented tooling into their operations. So that's that one, Andrew.
Yeah, that, I mean, again, very comprehensive, of course, as we expect when it comes to these surveys and great reports that we put a great amount of time and attention to. So obviously, when it comes to, established and perhaps even slightly more mature data governance programs for these enterprises, they seem to have already gained a knowledge of how to get executive buy-in or
Mm,
buy-in across, the entire
yeah.
company in order to get these things going. For folks that might not be established or maybe just starting out, how are enterprises getting buy-in for these data governance programs?
Right, right. They're struggling to get buy-in. And so when we look at TWI, we look at any topic like this, we're with our data. We gather data that helps us determine the progress, for example, an organizational commitment to data governance, but also the struggles. And the struggles are many. On the organizational commitment, awareness. More survey respondents this time around said they lack widespread awareness of their company's data governance strategy. 43% lack widespread awareness of the enterprise data governance strategy in their companies that have such awareness. Only 29% said there's widespread awareness. So enterprises are trying to get buy-in. The senior brass and the people in charge of data governance are trying to increasingly ramp up communication and coordination and so-called data literacy to get people to understand the importance of data governance, to take it seriously, and to understand that it's a core business imperative. So it's really education of the stakeholders, the end users in companies that needs to happen to get them to A, take it more seriously, and B, to recognize that when a strategy is in place, that they should be implementing it within their teams, within their jobs, such as when you are using a self-service business analytics tool and you're downloading data from various internal sources and external sources, and you think that you can just sort of upload anything that you provide to a central repository for others to use, and then that's cool. You have to realize that you're potentially corrupting your company's data assets by just sort of throwing anarchy into the process. So in other words, self-service analytics is a great thing. Many people have gotten religion on data science and are doing it themselves using various tools, but there needs to be a regimen around data governance, a single version of truth, where everybody in your company is using a common sanctioned, governed data set for their analytics. So that's the degree of awareness that needs to be built up more in the business for data governance to become a real sustainable, widespread practice. That's one area of buy-in that enterprises are struggling to gain. Slightly less than 1/5 of respondents have a data governance strategy that is communicated and known across organizations. So really only 1 in 5 organizations actually have such a strategy. So it's not just a matter of making the grassroots aware of the strategy. You need a strategy, which means you need senior executives to take the initiative, CTO, CDO, CIO, whatever, the chief executive, everybody at the executive level needs to come together to put together a unified strategy and approach for implementing strong data governance. And then the task is making the grassroots, everybody, all levels of the organization aware and implementing those standards in their daily practices. Um, and only 1 in 3 who responded to the survey, 1 in 5, I should say, have communicated these strategies they have. Only 1 in 3 actually have a strategy. I'm correct what I just said ago. So only 1 in 5 have communicated their strategy effectively. Only 1 in 3 have actually put a strategy in place.
Hmm.
What I'm getting at, Andrew, to get buy-in, you need a strategy. You need to communicate that strategy, and you need people in your organization to take that strategy seriously and be aware that they themselves must implement it in their daily practices and so forth. So to gain buy-in from your end users, from your knowledge workers, you need to have all of that in place. A general data literacy capability needs to be drilled into people's heads, really, on with onboarding in their organization, but also in their daily working lives, and that can be a tough, a Sisyphean challenge for many data governance professionals to do that.
Sure. Yeah, I would imagine, as you're talking about this, we've heard other folks say kind of similar things where it's not like there is no finish line here for this process, right? This is just a
No,
continual ongoing process. You have to, like you say, make sure everyone is drilled in understanding the importance of this constantly.
yeah.
So that can always be a challenge. It doesn't matter specific to data governance or any other thing that a company might want to implement in.
Think about it in your personal life, just keeping your own books in order in your household, all your finances and everything else. Things can get disarrayed very quickly because we all live busy, complex lives, and we're running very fast just to live our lives.
Hmm.
And our records can easily get out of order if we don't stop and remind ourselves on a regular basis, oh, okay, I need to take stock and where we're at. I need to then clean out my files and get rid of the unused and unnecessary files, but also to recognize, or to at least to ask myself, do I have all the records I need to live my life effectively?
Hmm.
Do I trust all the data in all the records? Is it out of date? How do I know it's out of date? So in other words, imagine taking this ongoing stock in a business, a complex business. It's like that's why you need standards and frameworks, and you need dedicated people, data stewards or data governance professionals, whose job it is just to crack the whip on data quality, and data mastering and so forth.
Right.
It's an industrialized process, or it needs to be in an organization. It's like it's a thankless chore, data governance, but somebody's got to do it.
Hmm. Well, I
Somebody
mean,
should
you
put eyes on it.
teed me up beautifully there because my next question was going to be how are enterprises organizing their data governance programs from, you talked a little bit about some of the roles. So can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about personnel as well as, of course, the actual organizing of the program?
Yeah, what our survey found is that about two-thirds of organizations now are starting to clearly indicate ownership responsibilities for data sets. When I say ownership, well, I mean, the company as a whole owns the data, but in terms of responsibility for your finance data, customer data, manufacturing data, and so forth, organizations do take seriously, and in two-thirds of cases, they have identified clearly who has ownership slash stewardship slash governance responsibilities for the various subject area domains. That's good. That's considerable progress over time, which means that when push comes to shove, it's clear if data quality suffers in one area, who's got to fix it. So the CFO owns the finance data, his or her organization does. The chief customer officer or the equivalent owns all the customer data. That's important. Then the data governance process needs to align with those, and usually does, with those ownership responsibilities. Um, Less than two, but this may sound like it's not good enough, but it is progress. Less than 2 in 5, that's 36% of organizations have established company-wide or line of business governance processes that address the need to manage data assets in accordance with a wide range of uh, emerging mandates like ethics, fairness, equity, anti-bias, and so forth. That's important. Data quality management has been the heart and soul of data governance for a long, long time. In the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a growing realization that governance needs to address all important mandates concerning how you use data, how you manage data in your business, ethics, fairness, anti-bias, and so forth. 2 in 5 now, close to 2 in 5 organizations have actually established processes that on some level are beginning to address these concerns as ongoing practices where there is stewardship responsibility identified either with individual roles or individual teams or generally within the company that somebody's got to fix this stuff or address this stuff. that's important. So over time at TBR, we see this growing where organizations will organize data governance both around subject area domains, but also around compliance stakeholders or mandates. These are two ways of organizing a common set of core functions. But these, in a sense, you can look at governance as overlapping team structures with a common asset they're managing. There's those people who are responsible for the data by domain. And domain associates with the use of that data in the operation of the business. And then there's those, let's call them stewards, who are responsible for ensuring that the organization manages all this data in conformance and alignment with both external mandates and internal mandates that span all data domains. So that's very important. But 2 in 5 organizations taking ethics seriously now in this context is progress over time. We see based on what we've seen in past data governance surveys at TDWI. But in terms of structuring, organizations vary widely in terms of those who versus in terms of those who centralize data governance at the corporate level versus those who have decentralized it out to the different lines of business or the regions. And really, there's no one right answer. If you're a highly decentralized organization and the business units have a great degree of autonomy from each other and from the central brass, then generally it makes sense then to also let each business unit manage all of their data governance processes and platforms themselves. Unless, of course, you have a common set of customers or a common, let's say you're all in one country and you have to conform to the laws and regulations of the country or countries in which you operate, then you absolutely, as a business, need to at least harmonize all those disparate data governance processes around a common framework. And many organizations do that now, especially multinationals, where they have a enterprise-wide data governance coordinating council. We see a lot of organizations that do that, that ensure that at least those groups are talking to each other. They have a common approach, perhaps using common tools, or at least they have a common center of excellence where they are harmonizing their practices. So in terms of how organizations structure this function, it varies widely, but increasingly it's data governance is managed in enterprises in a more global sense, that it's not a once and done kind of a thing, that it's a practice that needs to keep evolving with the state of the mandates that you face, with the growing in alignment with the growing range of data that needs to be governed. And it needs to be done in a way that's scalable, can scale with the organization. So these are all imperatives that data governance professionals everywhere recognize and are racing to address in their practices.
All right, Jim, I got one final question for you here. We talked a little bit, about the tools and platforms, during the course of the conversation, but are there any specific tools and platforms that enterprises are using for data governance that you can call out?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, data catalogs and data catalogs. This is actually a fairly young product category. When I say young, about 10 to 15 years ago, data catalogs weren't a thing yet in terms of infrastructure. But data catalogs have come along very fast in the last 10 years in terms of enterprise adoption. What a data catalog essentially is, it's a centralized cloud resource. It can be internal to your company, or it can be common to your B2B supply chain, but usually it's an internal asset that you as a company use to manage all the metadata pertaining to your data, manage the glossaries, common standardized glossaries for your data semantics, the semantics itself, and it also to increasingly to support unified search and curation and discovery of the data that you have, and to enable, as an enabler, a data catalog is a central enabler for teams of governance professionals to have a common view of all your data sets, who owns them, where they originated. The catalog often it ensures access controls, of course, on access to all of the data are rigidly enforced. Catalog is a piece of infrastructure that's aligned with your and often implemented closely with your metadata management, with your like your knowledge graphs. The knowledge graph is is an important asset increasingly that's coming into these environments to enable your data governance professionals and users to look at data in its broader connected context so that it's clear from the catalog what data sets are linked to other data sets, both in terms of the downstream applications like dashboards in which they're all displayed, but also in terms of needing to be like updates to the data sets needing to be harmonized across different business processes. So data catalogs are a core resource that half of the respondents in the enterprise have said that they have implemented already and are in production or well along the way to being in production. That's important. Also, data access and usage monitoring. For governance, data access and security controls and usage monitoring are fundamental as well. 42% of the respondents said that they have implemented in their organizations centralized data access and usage monitoring capabilities that span their entire data set. Very important because really data governance is it's quality controls, it's security controls, it's controls on usage. It's controls on data backup and recovery. There's a lot of different policies that and functions under the heading of data governance. So the catalog and the usage and access monitoring and the data lineage and impact tracking, which is the third most prevalent piece of infrastructure in these environments, are absolutely important to support end-to-end visibility into all of your data all the time by all stakeholders to support all of their functions. So what we found is that those have definitely achieved widespread adoption in businesses everywhere. But also the core of data governance has always been data quality management and master data management to ensure that you have high quality data sets and that your quality management and data mastering practices span all of your core structured data sets. Those are widespread, but only in about 1/3 of enterprises is there a unified central deployment of DQM or MDM that is used by all data governance professionals. Well, we interpret that to mean that many companies, there might be data quality profiling and cleansing tools, different ones used by different data owners in different parts of the business without necessarily any one common tool common to them all. That's what we've often seen over the years at TWI is that the decentralization of many companies' data environments has resulted in many pockets of high quality data quality management, but not necessarily a unified capability that's managed and monitored and controlled out of the central brass, as it were. But there's a growing stack of tools that enterprises have adopted or are adopting, including but not limited to data pipeline observability, a unified single pane of glass to view it all, automated detection of sensitive information, um, automated data risk remediation, in other words, being able to detect data issues before they happen, is so that so that fixes can be implemented in an automatic way before they become a problem. Only 1 in 5 are currently doing full automation of data risk remediation. So in other words, enterprises, in terms of their maturity on the platform side, still have quite a way to go before they implement a core, many of them, the majority of them implement a core stack of automated and scalable data governance tools that can address a broad range of compliance and governance mandates, including but not limited to data privacy, data ethics, and so forth. But that's coming. And in the study, we didn't really go into any depth in this particular study into related areas like generative AI governance with things like retrieval augmented generation. That is the sort of thing that TDWI definitely tracks. The upswing in governance tools for generative AI, the newer forms of AI. But that's entirely distinct from these established practices of data governance I've just laid out, which are all mostly focused on unstructured data. This new world of generative AI and retrieval augmented generation, much of this is focused on unstructured data, the data that's processed in your large language models and the like. Governance needs to be performed on that, absolutely. But here's the distinction, Andrew. Whereas traditional data governance, it's applying governance to the data that's mostly structured, that is then ingested in downstream into your analytics tools and other applications and used in various ways. The new world of governance related to generative AI is that generative AI generates data. That's what it does. So how does one control the data that is outputted from these tools to make sure it doesn't proliferate hallucinations and the like? Things like RAG are important there. It's broadly governance, but it's entirely distinct from traditional data governance. So I'm going to close on this note that data governance, the state of data governance, it's fascinating how quickly it's evolved in just the last several years to incorporate what I think of as a new hemisphere of governance related to things like generative AI. More and more of the data that we're going to be using in our lives and in our jobs will be synthetic data. That's synthetic data is really ersatz data that has the statistical signatures of authentic data. That's often used in increasingly synthetic data is used to train machine learning models when you can't get access. I'm a data scientist. When you can't get access to authentic from the source data because A, you don't own it, B, it may be withheld due to security or privacy restrictions and so forth. But nonetheless, synthetic data is coming into more enterprises over the next several years. And it's really, in many ways, it'll be one of the fuels used to perfect generative AI. And generative AI will be generating more of the data that's all around us. And that's it's an interesting area, but that's the focus of a future discussion between you and me.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it sounds like we could have just ended right there and then started the next one right as you were finishing your sentence there.
I'm going to put in a plug right now because today I recorded a few hours ago. That's why my mind's on this. I look ahead for 2025, what's ahead on generative AI. And I covered it in the
Hmm.
reg and governance of generative AI is a hot topic, so-called guardrails. Um, and synthetic data is so fundamental to all that. So you got to think that traditional data governance has been around for a long time. It's actually very mature in the sense that it's clear what's needed to have the full stack and to have a completely like top to bottom comprehensive managed practice for data governance in an enterprise. The core principles of traditional data governance are fairly clear. What's difficult is enterprises who are trying to stay in business and innovate and so forth, and also to make sure that they're spending their IT dollar effectively. The trouble is that data is so integral to everything now, and data applications are everywhere. Getting your arms around governance of the core stuff, because there's so much more data, it's become one of these kind of hydra-headed problems that you think you've got data governance down pat in data quality management, but then there's all these other things that come around like data ethics that you got to jump to and try to get your arms around that and get the infrastructure in place, train your people. So this is a tough nut to crack. Data governance, traditional data governance, it's expensive, it's complex, or it can be at least. You got to train the right people. You've got to have the right processes that pervade your organization, and everybody's got to get religion on the data governance too, part of data literacy. So, I'm sure that in 10, 20 years, there'll be somebody in my place here talking about data governance, talking about these same core things, and still saying, well, we're only halfway there because the destination, the target of maturity keeps pushing itself out as data becomes like so ubiquitous. So there you go.
Mm.
That's how I'm going to sum it up here.
I love it. Yeah. And thank you, Jim, for taking us through that. For folks that are interested in exploring the actual report, I'll go ahead and include a link in this episode's description so you can go ahead and take a look at that. We also had a couple other state of reports that were released this year, the state of AI readiness and the state of data quality previously, also available for folks to explore if you'd like those as well. But Jim, as always, thank you so much for your time today. I love talking with you. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks again.
Take care.
To subscribe to the Speaking of Data podcast, or to learn more about TDWI's research and training on all things data management and analytics, visit tdwi.org or click the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in.